This is on an 8x10 Frederick's watercolor canvas board. So these you'll frame in an open frame, just like a normal canvas, but because it is a canvas board, they're actually a little bit easier to frame than your normal stretched canvas, because you can get a normal, like, regular 8x10 frame that has glass, remove the glass and those little tabs that hold everything in. Works fine for this. So it's a very easy thing to frame. This canvas was provided to me by Frederick's, and I know it says watercolor canvas board, so just for transparency, they did provide it to me, but I already only used Frederick's before, so no difference for me there. But does say watercolor canvas board, but it works great for acrylics because it's so smooth. One of my favorite surfaces to paint on for acrylics. So that's what we're going to be using. So the first thing I need to do is just paint this solid black. I'm using Liquitex Basics as usual. And I just need that solid. The downside with working on a canvas board, you can see I'm having to hold it. There's nothing on the edge to grip to. So for oil painting, I don't like canvas boards at all. I mean, I use them every once in a while, but not often. Most of the time with acrylics, though, once this layer dries, I can use my hands to hold it in place if it starts moving around like what's happening right now. And you may be thinking, why black? That's going to look super flat. It won't once we start glazing the other colors over it. Now I want this to be mostly smooth, but it doesn't have to be perfect, because what we're going to be putting on top of it with the Northern Lights, because I can't say, was it Aurora Borealis? Am I saying that right? I don't know. Northern Lights is easier for me to say. That's going to hide if there's too much with the brush strokes. And I'm going to take a mop brush and I'm just lightly going to go over that and soften out any brush strokes that I do have. If there's some, like I said, not a big deal, but I want this to be soft. Okay. And now that needs to dry. So the first thing I'm going to do is take this mop brush and I'm going to rinse it. Your mop brush should only have paint on the very tip of the bristle. So I'm not going to dip the whole thing in the water. I want it to dry as quick as possible. I only need to tip the bristles in the water and rinse that. And then once I get that rinsed out, I'll go ahead and take a paper towel and I just dry that off as good as possible. And I'm rubbing the paper towel, or the paintbrush, in circles on that paper towel to really dry it. And so now it's ready to go for the next layers. If I don't do this and have it dry and ready, when I go to knead it again, I'm going to be, well, not in a good position. Moving on, I need to dry this completely before we do anything else, so I'm going to mute the microphone. So what I'm going to do now is start with getting the shape of the lights in the background. All I'm going to use is white. Don't worry about any colors right now. It's only getting the shape. So what I'm going to do, you've got to have a fine mist sprayer for this. This guy here is a must. This guy will give you fine water droplets that you just can't get if you're using a regular spray bottle. The droplets are too big. So we want to go with a fine mist sprayer. This is going to give us a nice fine mist and allow the paint to stay wet long enough to do what we need to do. I'm going to lightly mist this, because I need that to stay slightly wet. Not very wet, just a couple mists, that's it. And then start creating our shapes. I've got a bit too much water on my brush for how much water's on the canvas, so I need to reload, get a little bit thicker paint on there. Definitely going to need a bit more paint. I'm going to mist that again to make sure it blends nicely. And it doesn't even matter what brush you put it on with, but you are going to need that mop brush. We want it, I can't talk. What we want to do is pull this up. Oops, see, it's already drying. I need to get way more water on there. There we go. Pull that up. And I can do this in a couple of layers. But because I am not going fast enough, that started to dry a little bit. Okay, I need to dry this and then put the next layers on because I put too much water and I have to compensate for that by drying it. So I'm going to mute myself for a second here. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing, and I want to get much lighter down here. And I'm going to rework some of what I already have. So this whole area needs to be much lighter. I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom of the canvas there. This will be the glow behind the trees. And then here, let's get a little bit more. Too much water. Make sure that stays somewhat damp. And I'm going to pull that up again. Down here, it definitely needs more water. Down here, I need to lighten that up. Which looks weird now. It'll make more sense later. And I don't like over here, it just kind of ends, so let's connect some of these going out. And I've got to keep that wet. If you're not getting this part wet, it will not work. Okay, that'll work. Next, we dry this. So I'm going to mute myself again. Okay, 1 second. I need to climb behind my easel because my hairdryer just fell out of the wall. Actually, while we're at it, we can watch a message from the boys.
Without treats, these puppies are so sad. Your Patreon pledge of only $4 or more gives them cookies of happiness. Act now and the bad cow gets a treat too. Oh, and you also get over 300 art lessons and a new one every single week, plus other rewards. Sign up at patreon.com/Lachri.
Okay, and we're back. So now that this is dry, and actually it may not be all the way dry because my hairdryer fell out of the wall, so let's go ahead, or the plug did, let's go ahead and spend a little bit more time making sure this is really dry. What happens if that isn't completely dry, it will, when you go to put on your next layer, this will start to pull off the canvas. Now, if you're using a crappy paint, let's say Reeves, Dell & Rowney, I've had problems with both of those. Sometimes that will pull off no matter what you do. But in this case, with the Liquitex Basics, if you're using Grumbacher, any of the Liquitex paints, you're not going to really you shouldn't have that problem. So, but you do need to make sure this is completely dry first. So next, we're going to start glazing our color. This is the fun part. Actually, I take it back. First, I need to add stars. What I'm going to use is a brush. It's just kind of a stiff, round, not a high quality brush, but it works for this. And what I will do is thin the paint out a little bit with water. And I'm just going to, with white paint, it has to be thinned with water or this won't work. And I'm going to take a palette knife and I'm going to pull the palette knife towards me. Don't push away or you'll flick yourself in the face with paint. This is going to give us our stars. Now we will be glazing color over this. I'll use this one. It's a Simply Simmons brush. That'll work. So it's a little bit larger. And I need to dry this again so I don't smudge my stars. And I'm going to start with my deep violet. I'm going to add a little bit of blue so it's kind of purpley. And I'm just going to glaze. I'm going to thin that with water, with a lot more water. There we go. And I'm going to go over the black and the lighter areas. I can miss that just so I can blend it easier. Take a mop brush Soften that out. That looks really purple on the camera. It's actually a violet color. That looks really pretty. The purple's pretty, but this one's very violet. Okay, and as I move up, I'm gonna switch into more blues and then more greens. And I am thinning that with quite a bit of water. I'm gonna get some more green now. There we go. And I want to make sure this is going over the black too. This is part of what's going to make the black not look flat. This gives you a lot more depth than if you just left your background flat. You'll often hear people tell you not to use black paint. You can. Just make sure that you're putting other colors over it or mixing other colors in with it, and that gives you this really rich tone. Make sure that goes over the black too. So that purple is just my blue and deep violet mixed together. Make sure when you do these glazes, you do not want any white mixed in with them. If you add white, it's opaque and foggy. It's not a glaze then. And I'm taking that fan brush. Now I've got to make sure I go all the way into this because not all of my black is covered yet. There we go. And we'll fan that out. Now I'm going to go ahead and dry this, and I'm going to start putting some of the lime green into it. Okay, so now we've got our pretty base color, pretty base layers. Let's go ahead and dry this completely. Oops. And go back to the original filbert. And you need to make sure this is completely dry before you move on to this step. I'm still thinning this with a bit of water. I'm going to come on the bottom side of some of these and get that really vivid look. Just pull that up. That might be a little bit too much. Let me dab some of that off. Got a little crazy. There we go. And then pull that up again. And so now we've got these two layers. You've got the teal behind it, and you've got this really vivid color in front of it. Same thing, that canvas, you need that to be somewhat damp. But notice that I'm pulling up. Try not to pull down too much. I want that bottom edge to stay more clean. Okay, so that's really it for the lights themselves. I think I'm going to put some more stars though. Okay, next, let's get another stiff brush. I'm not going to go as crazy with the stars. I just want a few that are a bit brighter. That's it. Okay. Now we add trees. I'm going to start with just black paint. I'm going to line out, how far up do I want my trees to go? So let's just make lines first. Again, this is really very deep violet. I don't know why that's coming out so purple here. But yours can be any color you really want. Want to get some variation in the trees? Okay, and I'm just going to move my brush back and forth, almost a zigzag pattern, but it needs to overlap. That's very important. Do not do just straight rows going back and forth. That's something I know it's kind of hard to see with how dark it is, but that's something that I see people do a lot is just this straight rows, and it never looks good. See how I kind of zigzag but overlap? Okay, next tree. Actually, there was one back here. Of course, thinner at the top, wider as we move down. There we go. A few hints of some trees in the background so it doesn't just look like a straight row going through, which would be very weird. Okay, now I need that to dry so I can put some highlights. And now the highlights. So I'm going to use the same brush. And when you do the highlights, you really want to make sure, do not try to cover everything. We want some of that black peeking through. We want a lot of the black peeking through, actually. So I'm going to take the same blues and violets that I used in the background and add white to it. I don't want just straight white. That would be way too bright for this. We're just going to come, oh, not bright enough, a little bit more. We should at least be able to see it. There we go. Oh, too light. Let's throw some more color in there. Let's try this one. There we go. That's better. So I'm using a lighter version of the sky. Don't cover all the black. If you do cover too much black, you can always come back through and add more, but it's much easier if you just don't cover too much to begin with. Okay. And she is finished. So all we need to do now is sign it. Now, whoever gets this is going to want to frame it in order to hang it because it's not like a normal canvas that hangs. There's no hanger on it. So I want to make sure that I'm up a little bit above wherever the frame would be so that it doesn't block that. And what I usually will do is hold a brush. Do I want my signature here or do I want it here? I think I want it over the trees. Yeah, I actually would prefer it over the trees, I think. I kind of like the empty space where it just fades out over here. So I am going to take my liner brush. So let me find a liner brush. This one is a number 2 synthetic hog-haired liner. I'm using white with that deep violet again, and I'm going to go up a little bit. Right up here. Because the trees are not the focal point of this painting. If they were, I wouldn't be signing over the trees. The focal point is here. The trees are just off in the distance, so I can just sign right over them. They're just kind of an added, look, you're looking at the sky type thing. The trees help set that scene. And let me show you. Actually, I want to see if my color is more accurate this way. Kind of. It still looks really purple to me, whereas that's more of a deep violet in person. But that would be the finished painting of the Northern Lights. This looks way better in person. Here, this is coming out like the contrast is a little weird, a little opaque where it shouldn't be. But it's a very easy way to get Northern Lights. Mine, I would say, are a little bit more translucent. They have a much softer look.